So what do you guys think? So now we're going to look at 3 ETFs, and these are very exciting to me. I really like diving in and finding out why some ETFs have much higher returns than others. I find that we can learn so much just by looking underneath the hood. At the outset here, this is not financial advice. I just want to help you to see some stuff that maybe other investors don't see because they don't look as closely as you are right now by watching this video. So we're going to look at 3 ETFs, and I invest in the first 2. The return for VOO has been 82%. The next ETF that I'm going to look at is VGT. That's the second ETF I happen to own shares of. And the return on VGT is 166% over that same 5-year period. And the third ETF we're going to look at is SOXX, which has returned 265%. So that's 100% more than VGT. And finally, we're just going to take a quick look at the other major semiconductor ETF, which is SMH, which has returned 381% over the last 5 years. So what can we learn from this? What's going on? Well, I think the first thing to notice is that the highest returning ETF also happens to have a huge stake in NVIDIA, 27% of SMH. And while this ETF is not the focus of this video, I just want to point out that, any ETF that owns a lot of NVIDIA is going to have really abnormally high returns. The warning in this, and I have nothing against NVIDIA, I like the stock, I own some stock, but you're really dependent on one company having phenomenal returns, and if it disappoints, that will affect the overall ETF. Okay, enough of that. Let's look back at the first ETF, VOO, now that we've compared the returns. VOO, while it's pretty weighted towards these really growthy 7 or 8 magnificent stocks, the top holding in this particular ETF is Microsoft at 7.25%. The number 2 holding is Apple, and that's at 7%. NVIDIA is at 4%, Amazon is 3% of VOO, and then the rest of them are all 2% or smaller, like Meta, Google, Berkshire Hathaway, Tesla, and Broadcom. So when we look at this ETF, it's the most diversified of the ETFs we're going to talk about. However, it's still pretty heavily weighted towards technology. Now, let's take a look. That was the 82% total return for 5 years. When we look at VGT, now we have a doubling of the return, just investing in a tech ETF, and this is a Vanguard Information Tech. This is 166% return over these 5 years, 20% Microsoft, 20% Apple, 5% NVIDIA, 4% Broadcom, 2% in Adobe, Salesforce, AMD, Accenture, Cisco, and Oracle. So what you're seeing here is tech has done so well that it's actually been a detractor to invest in the S&P 500 because it owned all of these stocks outside of the tech world. If we had a crystal ball and we knew that tech would continue to return, twice as much? 166% versus 82% for VOO. Of course, we'd put all our money in VGT, but we don't have a crystal ball. And there are times when technology stocks have underperformed the market. So that is why I don't think, for my own investing, it's smart to go all in on one sector. In fact, every month, this is my own situation, again, not financial advice, every month I contribute to VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market, because I don't want to be overly exposed to just one sector. I also happen to own some shares of VOO. It's just one of those things where more diversification provides, I think, a little bit more confidence in the long-term prospects of the portfolio. So now let's take a look at SOXX, which is this much more diversified ETF, iShares ETF. SOXX has now returned 265% versus VGT, which is 166. So look at that, 100% higher return. But now we're not only investing in tech, we're investing in this very narrow part of the technology sector, which is semiconductors. So SOXX has a heavy allocation to NVIDIA at 11%. Again, that is one of the main reasons this particular ETF has vastly outperformed VGT. So NVIDIA is at 11% of SOXX, AMD is 10%, Broadcom is 9%, Qualcomm is 6%, Intel 5%, and then these rest of these are all 4%. Marvell, Applied Materials, Lam Research, Taiwan Semiconductor, and ASML. So in that one, you can see, wow. Now, one thing that I have noticed is that semiconductors are very cyclical. So you'll have a year or two of like boom times when the industry does really well. And then you'll have like a year or two when there's oversupply of chips, way too much production, and then demand slacks off. And so you just have pricing go down, and sales go down, and revenues, income goes down, and then these companies tend to suffer. We're in that right now, believe it or not, except NVIDIA seems to be immune. So we'll just, even though we're just focusing on these three ETFs, VOO, VGT, and SOXX, let's just take a look at SMH, which is a Van Eck ETF. It's just kind of instructive to see what's going on here. 381% return over 5 years, which is crazy. But the top holding is NVIDIA at 27%. What's insane to me is paying an ETF company 0.35% expense ratio to put you 27% in one stock when you could do it yourself. So 27% NVIDIA, Taiwan Semiconductor 10%, AMD 6%, Broadcom 6%, ASML 5%, Applied Materials 4%, Lam Research 4%, Qualcomm 4%, Intel 4%, and Texas Instruments at 3%. So, that's a very high octane concentrated ETF. To me, it just seems insane to pay so much money to an ETF company to put you 27% into one stock. But obviously, a lot of people like this particular investment because the returns are so great. Anyways, I'm interested in your thoughts. You guys are watching this. Do you invest in either VOO or VGT or SOXX or SMH? And if so, what inspired you to do this? And the other thing I want to mention, since we're talking about tech here and semis, is I've been investing, as you guys know, in a portfolio. I don't know if all of you guys know, new people don't, but starting in January at the first trading day, which was the 2nd of January, I invested in 10 different semiconductor stocks. And what I'm doing every month is adding to this portfolio. And what I've noticed is, it's done pretty well, and I'm pleased with the results. However, I have not outperformed SOXX or SMH, which are kind of my benchmarks, right? Because I'm investing in semiconductor stocks, and those ETFs are also. But what I'm not investing in these 10 stocks is NVIDIA. And the main reason for this is, first, I already own some NVIDIA stock. I'm not trying to duplicate that. But I want to invest in small companies, generally between $1 billion and $8 billion in market cap. And, I can't buy a company that's a $1 trillion company in this portfolio. The other thing that I like about what I'm doing is, I don't care what NVIDIA does. You know, if it goes to the moon and stays there, it's not a big deal because the semiconductors in my portfolio, those companies are, well, they'll do fine. But what I like about not owning NVIDIA is if it drops suddenly for some reason, it can't go to the moon forever. My portfolio is not going to be directly impacted by NVIDIA stock. I like that. So the interesting thing is I'm actually, you know, on most days that semis go up, they're going up slightly more than my portfolio because NVIDIA is pulling up the whole semiconductor market. And so these ETFs that own 27% of NVIDIA are going to do really well, or that own 10% of NVIDIA. But the good thing about not being too heavy in NVIDIA is if and when that stock stops going to the moon, I'm not going to be, you know, if it falls 10, 20%, and you guys need to be prepared. Again, not investing advice, but be prepared for the possibility that NVIDIA could fall 15 or 20% in a week or less, because it can happen. This stuff happens in markets all the time. So there's something to be said for diversifying and not being too concentrated in any one stock or any one sector. So those are just my thoughts. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. So write in the section, the comment section, what you think about investing in tech stocks in general, like VGT, or semi-stocks like SOXX or SMH. Or if you're more of the kind of investor who likes just to diversify it and sleep well at night because you're not worried about any little particular part of the stock market, you just buy a little of everything like in VOO. Thanks so much for watching this video. Look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, it would be great to have you aboard. I talk about investing in small cap stocks, specifically semiconductor stocks this year. And I also talk about investing in ETFs. So if that's something you'd like to learn more about, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.